So, if you've been trying to make sense of the US housing market lately and just feel kind of lost in the fog, trust me, you are not alone. Right now, the forecast is anything but clear. We're seeing all these conflicting signals that make it incredibly tough to predict what's coming next. So, let's dive in and unpack what exactly is creating all this uncertainty. This is the big question, isn't it? It's on everyone's mind, whether you're trying to buy, thinking about selling, or just staying put. It really feels like for every piece of good news, there's another worrying headline right around the corner. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break down the three big storm clouds gathering over the market, and then look at the long-term climate pattern that's making everything even more complicated. All right, our first storm cloud, and this is the one causing the most immediate turbulence, is the absolute roller coaster of mortgage rates. They seem to swing wildly from one week to the next, and there's a huge global reason for it. That's right. Economists are pointing to geopolitical tension in the Middle East as the single largest driver of rate movement right now. You see, any development that could affect energy prices has this direct, almost immediate ripple effect on what you'll pay for a mortgage. And that instability, it's just injecting a huge dose of volatility into the whole system. You can actually see that tension playing out in the upcoming inflation data. Markets are bracing for headline inflation, that's the one that includes volatile stuff like food and energy, to jump up. But the number the Federal Reserve really pays attention to is core inflation, and that's expected to have a much smaller rise. So you've got these two numbers telling kind of different stories, which, you guessed it, just adds to the overall anxiety. And to really hammer this home, Redfin economist Shen Zhao, whose analysis we'll be following here, says the market is at a critical moment. Whenever the experts start saying things are on a knife's edge, that's when you know the uncertainty is real. And believe it or not, this rate volatility is just the first layer of confusion we need to get through. Okay, let's move on to our second storm cloud, which builds on the first. Solving the jobs puzzle. Because if you only looked at the monthly headlines, you'd think the US labor market was completely erratic, making it almost impossible to get a real read on the health of the economy. I mean, just look at this chaos. The market adds a bunch of jobs one month, then sheds a massive number the next, only to gain them all back again. Seriously, trying to follow these month-to-month swings is enough to give anyone whiplash. But believe it or not, there's a reason for all this madness. It all comes down to a change in how the numbers are calculated. The Bureau of Labor Statistics updated its birth-death model, which is basically its best guess at jobs being created by new businesses and lost from closing ones. The new model is way more responsive to what's happening right now. But the trade-off is that the monthly numbers are now way more volatile than they used to be. So, how are we supposed to make sense of it? Well, our expert, Chen Zhao, has some advice. Just ignore the monthly noise. She says if you look at a 3 or 6 month average, you get a much more reliable read. And what does that tell us? Well, it shows a labor market that is, yes, weak, but it has stabilized. It's not actively getting worse. Okay, so we've got volatile rates and confusing jobs data. Our third storm cloud brings us from that big picture macro view right down to your neighborhood. We're seeing a historic flood of unsold homes just sitting on the market. Take a look at this number, $347 billion. Let that sink in for a second. That's the total value of what we call stale home listings across the entire US right now. These are homes that have been sitting there unsold for months on end. In fact, more than half of all homes currently for sale have been on the market for over 2 months. That is the highest level of stale inventory ever recorded for this time of year. It's a huge flashing signal that something is off balance. And the cause is pretty much classic economics 101. There's a fundamental imbalance between supply and demand. Put simply, we have way more people trying to sell their homes than we have active, qualified buyers who are ready to pull the trigger. And of course, this isn't happening everywhere equally. The problem is really concentrated in places like Florida, which has the highest number of these stale listings. But then, on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have California's Bay Area, which has the lowest. So it's a great reminder that in real estate, location is still a massive factor. Now, those three things, the rates, the jobs data, the unsold homes, that's the immediate weather causing all this turbulence. But to really understand the forecast, we have to look at the underlying climate. And what we're seeing is a massive generational gridlock in the housing market. And this chart, wow, this chart tells a huge part of that story. Baby boomers, many of whom are empty nesters at this point, own 28% of the nation's large family-sized homes. Meanwhile, millennial families with kids, the very group that needs those homes the most, own just 16%. And what's happening is that both groups are essentially stuck. On one side, boomers often don't have a good financial reason or even good options to downsize into. And on the other side, you got millennials who are being squeezed by sky-high prices and a severe shortage of the exact homes that boomers are still living in. It's created a gridlock that's just freezing up the whole market. So, when you put it all together, what you get is really a perfect storm. You have the immediate turbulence from mortgage rates and that confusing economic data, all swirling on top of this deep, structural, generational problem that's been building for years. And all of this leaves us with one final critical question. The housing market has always been about passing the torch from one generation to the next. But right now, with boomers holding onto the keys and millennials feeling locked out, it is completely unclear who or what is going to build the bridge needed to get this market moving again for the next generation.